I'm going to start with Professor Wu. I was going to not engage, but you've drawn me in. So what's broken now? Give me some examples of where you're seeing internet service providers regulating political speech or shutting down potential speakers. I don't see a big public outcry that this is happening.
Right. I would point you to countries outside the United States where they don't have net neutrality to suggest where you see the problem. Now, in the United States...
But it's the countries themselves that are doing that through their internet policy and not so much private sector ISPs, isn't
Often
it?
it's a mixture of the two, you know, whether it's the private ISP or the government involved. And I also don't think the government should discriminate, should censor the internet either. But let me say the reason we haven't had a problem over the last 20 years is that we have had de jure or de facto net neutrality policy in place.
Well, okay, again, I have limited time, so I want to get to some of the other people. Because this sounds like a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of argument. I've been on the internet for a very long time. I was back when I was in college in the 80s actually accessing Usenet and things like that. And whenever there was some sort of content regulation or something that wasn't deemed fair, there was a huge outcry. And I don't think there's a more vocal advocacy group out there than internet users. We need look no further than when we were looking at SOPA and PIPA in this committee to see how effective an advocate internet users are. You've got the ability, even though we are seeing a consolidation in the number of providers in the vast majority, outside of rural areas, you typically will have 2 or 3 providers. You'll have a cable provider, a wireline provider, and a wireless provider of broadband. So, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner McDowell, do you see it broken, and do you see a problem here?
I don't, and the FTC has studies this in this regard, but I want to focus on one part of your question, which is the values. We've heard a lot about the values of internet users in a variety of ways, reflecting on the debate. I think that's important to note, that what consumers value in their activities on the internet is in fact what lies at the center of antitrust analysis. I've heard now, I think, something that needs correction with respect to how cramped a view of antitrust sort of is out there. Antitrust is a consumer welfare-based system. This means what economists do is not merely focus on the things we can count, but also on what consumers value. And to the extent in antitrust analysis that things like the amount of content, the quality of content, innovation, things other than price and quantity, these are captured within an antitrust analysis.
Right. And Commissioner McDowell, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yep. So first of all, I'd like to say the Federal Trade Commission can act at the same speed as the Federal Communications Commission, or lack thereof. So the idea that antitrust law is slower moving is just not the case. But also, I think it's important to point out that those countries where the internet is regulated more, there is less freedom overall, but especially less freedom of speech. There's a direct correlation between more regulation, more state involvement with the net, and less freedom, because these countries are balancing, it's really censorship.
So potentially, could some of these net neutrality regulations get in the way of innovative offerings? I pay close to $100 a month for my internet access. I like it fast. I've got 4 people in my house who are typically all streaming at the same time. But my mother, before she passed away, was email and Facebook. I mean, would net neutrality of making these streaming services equally available as opposed to somebody who just wants to use internet and email, doesn't it force internet service prices higher and take away my options to buy a limited account?
The case for antitrust overregulation is as simple as this. The general economic view is these types of contracts across many industries help consumers. What the antitrust ex post approach allows you to do is have the benefits of those contracts when they help consumers and reserve enforcement for those instances where we can find, and we do, abuses of market power. It allows consumers to have both.
All right, and Professor Wu and some net neutrality advocates have suggested that antitrust law is ill-equipped to deal with this. While I disagree, are there any tweaks that we should be looking at in antitrust law that would perhaps address these problems and be there should the problem arise?
Antitrust over the last 50 years has evolved significantly and fine-tuned approach based on modern economics that focuses on consumer welfare. That approach is one that incorporates things like non-price dimensions, quality, and innovation, exactly the things that we would want an antitrust policy to do. In my view, that consumer welfare approach has served antitrust incredibly well. It is flexible enough to reach these types of concerns, and in my view, doesn't need any tweaking. It does what it does well. What it does well is broader than some of what we've heard, and I don't think it should do more than what it already does well.
Thank you. I see my time has expired.